Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Atheist Experience. My name is Robert Kruger. I'm your host, and today we have a special guest joining us, Carlos Morales from the Truth Over Comfort podcast. And thank you for joining us, Carlos.
Thanks for having me on, Robert.
So, if you do have any comments, guys, while we're doing the show, please comment on the YouTube comments area. I'm going to be watching that for any questions, anything you would like to bring up during the show. Do have a... Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Atheist Experience.
Just mute the other in the back. Make sure not to click pause. Yeah, it's like mute, not pause. Like pause.
All right, well, I'm going to open up the other link and so I can get your comments here. And sorry about the repeat there. Just a moment. There we go. Sorry about that. So today we are going to go over the second half of the... All right, well, I'm going to open up the other link and so I can get your comments here.
You just got to click that mute button on whatever YouTube video is playing.
Just a moment. You got it open?
No, I do not have anything open. That's playing from your side.
Okay. What the hell? All right, well, I'm going to close this. There we go. Sorry about that. So today we are going to go over the second half of the... All right, well, I'm going to open up the other link so I can get your comments here.
Just got to click that mute button on whatever YouTube video is playing.
Just a moment. Yeah. You got it open? It's correct.
No, I do not have anything open. That's playing from your side. Bit of a technical glitch.
Looks like I'm not going to be able to get the comments open unless...
Bit of a technical glitch.
Unless Carlos can do it.
I'm not sure.
I know. There we go. I got it. I had it open in another window on another browser. So there we go. Now we've got the comments open.
All right. Chaos is over. The free market will reign supreme.
Sorry about that, guys. All right, one more time. What we are doing is we are going over Francois Tremblay's, I don't know, frequently asked questions for, oh my God, this thing's killing me. Frequently asked questions for Anarcho-Capitalists. And, well, I'm going to open up that screen here and try to not open up the other thing. And there we go. And there we go. All right, so I got that open. So we're doing the second half, and the second half deals with property, specifically anti-proprietarianism. And this is weird because the definition that they start off with is a bit odd. It says property, as used here, refers to the kind of ownership that allows for accumulation of wealth through usury, which is tied in with the stickiness and ultimate decision-making power attributes. Okay. Usury, as we debunked previously, is this idea that you can somehow be taking advantage of another person by providing them an opportunity through collaboration, through the use of some of the things that you've got available to you and some of the things they've got available to them, whether it be your capital and their labor or their capital and your labor. And so we've already debunked the idea of usury, but let's just assume that he's talking about property where you can provide yourself some continuing income through the fruits of your own previous labor by having somebody else take those fruits and use them in the future. Does that make sense? Does that sound like what this guy's trying to talk about, Carlos?
I suppose so. The thing is, he's mixing words up so often here. It's kind of hard to understand where he is getting at, especially in point 2, which I guess we'll hit in a second here. But some of the statements he's just making make no sense to me whatsoever, and it's like a philosophical backwards hat that's making absolutely no sense and being sophisticated to the point where only he can make sense of it, so that he can then feel elitist because we're too dumb to get it. So.
Yeah. Well, as far as I understand it, you've actually met this guy in person, Francois, right?
Yeah, Francois Tremblay, an old pal. He used to run a page called Graveyard of the Gods. He actually introduced me to Anarcho-Capitalism and everything else, but over a long period of time, he's kind of dwindled from this Anarcho-Capitalist perspective to this weird anti-natalist, leftist, socialist thing that I don't quite understand. And my biggest kind of beef with the majority of statements he's making, and this is kind of out of the context of this particular article, is that he codifies himself as an anti-natalist, which means that he believes that it's actually immoral for you to have a child because there's pain in the world, and therefore that child will then have pain. So why he's trying to make any theoretical claims on morality or the future whenever he thinks it's bad for a future to even exist leaves me a bit perplexed. But, you know, people have their things to do.
Yeah. Well, it is something that, you know, as far as antinatalism goes, it's something that I've really wanted to kind of, you know, do a full show over. It's a really ludicrous philosophy that suggests that life is pain and only pain, and you are causing people pain by creating them, by bringing them into existence. And I suppose, yeah, maybe at the point at which a person discovers independence and becomes an independent person, they could sue their parents for having brought them into existence and you know, demand that the parents take them out of existence.
Oh, wait. So, wait, why don't you just kill yourself?
Yeah.
I mean, that's honestly the question I always have with all the antinatalist bullshit, right? So they'll state things like, well, due to overpopulation, all these other things, and the pain that people, you know, feel, therefore no one should have any more kids. But if you're really that self-sacrificial whenever it comes to these things, why don't you kill yourself right in front of a hospital, because your organs can be used to save maybe 6 different individuals, and give up all your property to the same people so that less people will feel pain. But that's also assuming the fact that someone like an antinatalist would have a rational worldview that is logically constructed, rather than some emotional interpretation, which is most likely based off of prior abuses that have occurred to them. You know, we can go Molyneux with it. Most likely, these people probably did not have the best of childhoods, which a lot of us did not. But we can. Some of us come out like a rough diamond, and other people come out as just a mush of a pile of irrational, you know, being. And I think that's a lot of the people who consider themselves anti-natalists. Yeah. I would love to talk to anti-natalist thing, or we can continue to go with this FAQ thing. But,
yeah, let's go ahead and finish the FAQ, and if we've got extra time, we can delve into the anti-natalist.
I would love to. All right.
All right. So he says, he's answering the questions from the anarcho-capitalist to him. The question from an anarcho-capitalist would be, aren't property rights necessary for a free market? He responds, this question hinges on one's definition of freedom. To the capitalist, unilateral and total control over one's own land means that he is free. But we accept this belief is in unilateral and total control over land no more than we accept the state's unilateral and total control over land. Okay. Both are based. Yeah, both are based on excluding and exploiting those who need the property to work or live or have no control over it. Oh, sorry, and have no control over it. So yeah.
Does he eat food, you think? Or does he take up land or space or anything? I mean, he must be completely invisible because he's not using any private property whatsoever if he's actually living under his philosophical conjectures, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing that I wanted to bring back from our previous conversation, not with you, but the previous show, yeah, every single human being on the planet, including infants, we're talking, 0 to 1 year olds, could have 2.2 acres of land if we distributed it evenly. Okay. Then if we actually look at the population in cities like New York City and Tokyo, the population density for the same, for an acre of land is about 18 people per acre. But they seem to be able to work it out for some reason. A lot of people don't necessarily want land for their own sustenance because they've made arrangements with other people to do what's called specialization of labor, where I don't actually have to work the land to produce my own food and my own sustenance and my own water and all that kind of stuff. I've got agreements with other people. And what this allows us to do is actually, I don't know, produce more wealth and become a more prosperous society where we can have cool things like iPhones and computers and Xboxes and whatever it may be, rather than being subsistent farmers. So, yeah.
Well, are you suggesting though that this is in any way trying to basically make the case for the agrarian route? Is that what he's kind of insinuating?
Well, I mean, I guess what he's basically saying is that if you don't have land, you can't possibly provide for your own existence.
Well, no, if you don't have property, you can't provide for your own existence, but that has very, very little to do with land. For instance, I rent a piece of land that someone else owns because I'm not the main person who takes care of this given area. And honestly, I'd rather not have to own it in this particular case because then I don't want to have to be the one who has to exchange the sale and everything else. That allows me more free time in order to be able to deal with the things I want to deal with, like, dribbling on about the extended words of a man who is obviously kind of insane, i.e. Francois Tremblay. So,
yeah. Okay. Bottom line is that physical land property is not a very large percentage of what it is that is property, what is wealth in this world, and the other fact is that there's tons and tons of it that's out there that you could actually appropriate for yourself through homesteading, should you desire to, if there wasn't a state. And this is where we have a significant difference between the state and with personal ownership. See, we don't accept the state's unilateral and total control over all the land in this country because they didn't homestead it. There's no, I mean, if let's say, for example, King George had come over to the United States and gotten together with some of his pals and they made ranches out of plots of land, and they'd made farms out of plots of land, and they made orchards out of plots of land, and they made racetracks out of certain plots of land. And they did all of this with all these different plots of land and made it into something new, something that was not there before, and converted the land from being unused, unowned, unclaimed into something that he owned and claimed and was using. And he did it for all of that land, then sure, maybe he would have some sort of claim on that. However, there comes a point in time where you actually have ceded ownership of land by letting it become defunct. It's what's it called when people basically abandon property? I mean, if you abandon something, then somebody else can claim ownership of it by squatting on it and so on. This is something that's common law has had for ages. So the state does not have a legitimate claim to all of this land. All it does is point out at the land and say, dibs.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually create anything. All right, so let's see. I guess he goes on to say, well, freedom in the general anarchist view cannot exist without the elimination of hierarchies and relations of dominance.
Does he have definitions?
I guess he's trying to define freedom there. He's basically saying, you know, you can't have freedom if you don't have the elimination of hierarchies and relations of dominance.
Okay. Sure.
But Carlos, this is my show, and I could kick you off whenever I want. So
no, this is my show. I get it. No, I wonder if he actually runs his own business, so he can actually understand the kind of work that CEOs and people like that actually have to do in order to be able to run a business. This is what, as basically you've been claiming earlier, the specialization of works. And also, whenever we discuss this thing about you can't really live your life or anything else without owning land, and the removal of specialization of specific tax, it's also incredibly unrealistic, right? So even if every single human being on Earth had their own 2.2 of land, not every single piece of land is actually usable in any way they could actually produce any food due to soil and things like that.
I'm talking about arable, livable, habitable land. All the land, if you actually took all of it, you would have a lot more than 2.2 acres per. I'm talking about land that can be used to grow food and to live on.
Oh, I don't know if it's actually that much. I mean, it's also going to have to do with species, temperature, and everything else as far as that's concerned. Because all of Nevada is pretty much fucked, right? As far as being able to use a lot of those things for much, except in specific areas where there actually is still some grass. Mainly, who's the guy in Nevada with the cows?
Oh, I forget what his name is.
With the guns and everything else. So there's just not a whole lot of fertile land either left, due in part to the state and its destruction of topsoil because of monocultural farming and other kinds of production that were a result of monopolistic practices by the state and subsidization. So I don't know. Let's keep going. No, let's keep going with this exploitation, domination, hierarchy, every other kind of term that he's using, without actually, defining it.
All right, so he claims that usury is a necessary component of property rights, and in the way that he's talking, and it implies that within a market there is a certain class of people, property owners, who have more rights than others based on invalid premises, and may therefore form a hierarchy with themselves as superiors. Therefore, there is no free market here. A free market is necessarily egalitarian.
Really?
Since freedom and equality are merely two sides of the same coin.
Oh, okay. So I don't get freedom until I have the genetic abilities to be able to lift up 600 pounds like Ronnie Coleman can? I mean, that's true equality, right? I also need a vagina and a penis at the same time, because that allows for perfect equality.
You're not free if you're not a hermaphrodite.
Yeah, and I should be accepted into the libertarian community purely because I happen to be attractive, like a lot of women in the libertarian community. But yeah, true equality, No, the equality movement thing is just absolute communist classist bullshit. And the thing is, I can understand what they mean in certain cases, but it's really just not about equality. It's about the ability to be able to trade and interact with other individuals freely without any kind of coercion, as this audience is well aware of.
Well, the thing that's critical to me is that for some reason they believe that equality is a desirable outcome. No, equality is not a desirable outcome. A person who works their ass off, who produces so much to benefit the rest of society in a huge way, is a far more valuable person to us as a society. They should be rewarded for their hard work. They should be rewarded for their efforts, instead of having a person who just, I don't know, lollygags around doing nothing. Maybe they don't deserve as much. I myself is pretty darn broke, and I don't really contribute that much. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Anyway, you want to go on?
Yeah, let's see. Oh, well, all that's needed for market exchange is some kind of ownership. Okay, I don't understand that. He just said property, but I guess ownership and property are not the same thing. All right, and possession works for that. So if you possess something, that's ownership. Okay, moving on. What are you going to do when I claim something to be my property? Doesn't your position necessarily imply coercion? This is a question he would be asked by an anarcho-capitalist. So his response is that typically that they believe the only possible consequence to being against a process or mechanism is to advocate its eradication by coercion. This is a result of a might makes right mentality. If one has the right values, one must therefore use might to impose one's values on others. Oh, I didn't know that we had a might makes right perspective in our society. Last time I checked, we had a non-aggression principle that said right, being the person who is not initiating an aggression, has the right, and therefore they may use the might to defend that. Seems kind of backwards, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm looking in this article to see how many times he uses the word, because I'm just guessing it's quite a bit. But yeah, no, he's it's just kind of that leftist anarchist kind of thingy. So
yeah. All right. So bottom line is yes. If somebody claims to have a right to their body, at some point in time, if someone is violating that right, you do have to use might. This is something that's factual. You have to do it. If you don't do it, then you're not claiming self-ownership. You're basically absolving self-ownership and abdicating your self-ownership and letting someone else take ownership of you and use your body as they see fit.
So if I leave my laptop for like 5 minutes and I'm not claiming ownership in the sense that it's in my hands, and then someone else takes it away from me, do they now own it? I'm confused.
Well, that's because they possess it. I mean, yeah, possession is that's some kind of ownership, and apparently you can have market exchange at that point. You can take I can take your laptop and give it to somebody else in exchange for that, and well, you can't do anything about it because you left it alone for 2 minutes. Okay. All right, so let's see here.
This is like trying to make sense of the Bible or something, like reading at it in like a logical way. Like, what the fuck is going on here? Come on now.
All right, so does we believe that as people come back to the fundamental idea that everyone is equally worth of consideration, not necessarily equally worth, not of equal worth, but equally worthy of consideration. Little slight change there, all right. And that we should all be responsible for our actions towards each other. Okay. They will rightly see property claims as an attempt to control others. No, it's to control the fruits of my labor. Because, as you just said, everyone is equally worthy of consideration, and we should all be responsible for our actions.
Our actions. So I do own myself here, right, at some point?
Yeah,
he's stating that I have ownership of my actions, which denotes that I have some form of self-ownership. He actually doesn't, Francois, from what I've been able to tell from this other stuff, does not believe in self-ownership, and if I do not own myself, I do not own my own actions, and therefore any kind of morality or moral imposing on me is like, you know, stating that it's immoral if a rock falls down. So, because nothing owns anything.
I think that it's pretty clear that he's actually saying, I mean, something that makes sense here. We're responsible for our actions towards each other.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if I aggress against someone else, then I have caused an injustice and they are due redress. Okay. All right. Makes sense. But apparently it just doesn't seem to apply to when I take actions on unowned, unclaimed land or objects that are out there and convert them into something of benefit to myself. I no longer get to own the fruits of my labor or the results of my action. I am not responsible for the results of my action in those cases.
Okay.
A little inconsistent there, but I guess we just have to disagree about that one. Kind of makes it hard to figure out, well, who gets what unless somebody else tells everyone how it works. I mean, realistically, how would you decide who's going to be able to use something? Is it just, well, I'm happening to pick it up and I'm just going to go ahead and keep it and use it, and if I let go of it to go to sleep, then somebody else can pick it up?
Yeah, it's kind of like trying to understand the human action, right? So pretty much all the socialist specific philosophies all lead to some kind of dictatorship.
Yeah, if
You
they
know,
don't have somebody telling everybody.
yeah, the thing is, and it also always ends up leading to one person having privileged rights over another and espousing specific moral claims that he himself does not have to follow, which is exactly how you find whether or not an authority figure is an arbitrary authority figure.
Yeah.
Whether it's an arbitrary form of morality, whenever the purveyor of moral dictates is the same person who has to break every single one of them in order to prove them, which is why the non-aggression principle and argumentation ethics are so important, because they're universalizable, which allows it to have some kind of teeth.
Yeah. I don't know. It just seems to me a request to have a dictator. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. I mean, as long as I get mine, I want somebody else to tell everybody what happens with it.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next one.
Well, then he actually, in this same point, kind of draws a parallel. He thinks that there's some sort of parallel between property and intellectual property. And intellectual property is a misnomer. It's not property, right?
Nope. Yeah, property necessitates scarcity. I mean, it's kind of byproduct of scarcity, of trying to understand it. If there's no actual scarcity to it and there's no rivalrous nature to it, then it is not property.
Yeah, the thing that's important about property is that it is rivalrous, that I cannot possess my computer and use it at the same time somebody else possesses my computer and uses it, or has final dictating power over how it is used. If I go
up to a tree and I knock off a coconut and that goes in my hand at the exact same time, an infinite amount of coconuts also exist. It doesn't really matter, right? There's no real.
In the case of coconuts, they are still rivalrous in that I can have my coconut and you can have your coconut, and they're two different coconuts, and they are rivalrous. You can't have.
No, that's fair. I think that analogy did not apply as well as I'd wanted to. That's a good point.
So, I mean, I understand the idea that, yes, having something be scarce is somewhat important to property, but it's not really relevant. What's relevant is that it's a rivalrous thing. That even if there are 5 billion of them in the universe, even there's a ton of them, an infinite supply of them. This one is in my hand, and I control it, and then I set it down over there, and I come back over to it to pick it up, and now there's a different coconut, or a different whatever it is. That's not the one that I wanted. The one that I wanted was the one that I had. That's my control. I controlled it. It's mine. So yeah, I think that the rivalrous thing is exclusive. Now, when it comes to intellectual property, there is no rivalrous nature to it. If you have a MP3 of a song that you put together and you made the MP3 or the CD, and I use whatever technology to push a button and make a duplication of it, I've got a copy and you've got the original. You still have what it was that was your thing. It's still yours. You still got it. I didn't take it away from you. So there is no property in that. Property is a claim that someone took something from you and you no longer have it.
Yeah.
All right, so he says, property is not a social construct. It is an extension of the self. This is a claim that an AnCap might make, and I think it's makes perfect sense to me. I mean, you would accept that property is not a social construct. It's an extension of the self, right? Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Then he says, he tries to respond to this saying that they're two separate issues, that...
yeah, he says... he froze up a bit there. He says, whether given objects are or are not an extension of the self does not indicate this type of ownership that we hold over them. Just like the fact that our relationships with others are extensions of ourselves does not indicate the type of relationships that they are. And in fact, the analogy works the same way, since the types of relationships that we experience towards other people are social contracts, yet those relationships are extensions of the self. There's no contradiction between the two positions.
Yeah, I just don't see that having two people who are intellectually capable of making decisions, they have the brain capacity to make decisions. They are persons interacting in a way that they interact, whether it be a friendship, uh, a I don't know, a parent-child relationship. There's all sorts of relationships that you could have, and these are determined by two people interacting and coming to negotiations about things. I don't negotiate with my rock. I pick it up. It's my rock. It has no ability to tell me, no, I'm not your rock. There is no intrinsic ability for the rock to disagree, or the tree, or the, I don't know, log cabin that I made. Right?
Well, the next thing what he does here is actually kind of correct. He brings up the misnomer of natural law.
Yeah.
Yeah, this view also implies some sort of metaphysical natural law, but for example, if this natural law states that performing labor on an unknown object or land, then we must question what constitutes labor. It is my bit of a land. I rub my shoe on it for a few seconds. Very few would say so, and this is because no one else around you would recognize it as such. What constitutes labor is up to society, and thus this means the very base of ownership is a social contract to avoid conflicts between individuals and not a natural law. And I think I would completely agree with that. It's not objective in the same way that something like gravity is objective. Whether or not society agrees that if I drop a rock, it'll fall down doesn't really matter. And yeah, private property, in a sense, is just a way to be able to better work with the irrelevant nature of society.
Yeah, I think that he does have a point here in that it is somewhat of a social construct. Yes.
Yeah.
It is, however, a social construct that has clearly been proven to, to reduce the level of abuse that would occur if you had a person who's a dictator run everything and tell everyone how everything is run. And it also is a more efficient method by allowing people who are in close proximity to the property to make the decisions related to that property because they have more information to provide themselves accuracy when dealing with the use of the property. It creates more wealth by having the property be managed by the person who has actually developed the property. The claim that I own some big body of water because I happen to drop a couple of drops of food coloring into it is obviously a very, very weak claim to the property, but then a much more severe or real example of taking property and making it one's own is to actually, let's say, put up a fence around the property, build a home on that property, and live there. But realistically, though, rather than being a societal convention, what it really could be is that I will use force to defend my claim upon it. In the case of claims being made for mining rights or for panning rights in the past, where we've been looking for gold in the gold rush, people would mark trees with various different methods, and they would claim a certain area as being theirs for panning or for mining. Now, the amount of marking was a little bit more than just marking it with your shoe, but it was certainly not as extensive as actually making a fence. So, yes, there are levels, and it's dependent upon the social interaction, the norms within the society. Agreed.
Yeah.
All right, so property is necessary due to scarcity of resources for individuals living together in society. I think that sounds right. Let's see what he says. He says the opposite's true. There's not much harm to be done by hoarding resources that are non-scarce. One may claim property over some of the sun's rays or some of the air, but he'd be seen as petty. But someone who claims property over a scarce resource instead of a mere possession is setting himself up as everyone else's enemy. He breaks his link to the whole of social activity when there is no reason for him to do so.
Hey, Robert.
Yeah.
Why aren't you letting me go into your fucking apartment and take all your shit? I mean, you're really making me mad that you own property. It makes me. I'm so pissed off right now.
Well,
I'm literally mad at the people who, create things like the iPhone through the transferring of particular materials from one land to another, which then inevitably lead to, well, not inevitably, right, but through the work of others lead to this beautiful key to the universe that is our iPhone. I'm really mad that any of them had any control at any point during that given process.
Well, I can't believe that I would do such a thing to set myself up as everyone's enemy. I mean, the idea that I would claim this bed to be mine so that I can sleep on it and I don't have to worry about getting cooties from somebody else who sleeps on it. Sorry, I guess I'm just a dick. What the hell?
You're just a dick, Robert. Why are you being such a dick, bro?
Can't believe it. I'm
well,
so
no, that is not a moral claim, right? What he's stating is in no way a logical claim. He's saying because my feelings, right?
my feels.
Because you own something, therefore you're a dick, right? So this is obviously a jealousy claim that is coming from a place of just anger, right? But instead of working in order to try to proliferate and get your own stuff, you're immediately a dick. So if a group of 10 people manage to take down a buffalo and then they all eat it, and number 11, who didn't do any work, then gets mad, that doesn't mean therefore they're not allowed to do it. My feels is not an argument.
Yeah, I would say my feels is definitely not an argument, and so I think we can easily take number 13 and say, no, the opposite isn't true just because you feel like it. Let's see. Possession is no different from property is a claim. Well, he says that property is the absolute right to enjoy and dispose of a given object, the ultimate decision-making power over that object, as long as it doesn't interfere with other people's absolute and ultimate power over their own objects. Okay, I don't see a problem with that. When we say this is my property, we imply that we are empowered to do anything, absolutely anything, we want with it, except for maybe aggress at other people, but whatever. Possession, on the other hand, does not recognize such absolutism. Yeah, we figured that one out. Any conception of ownership which is not ultimate or absolute is necessarily not property. For instance, without the right to usury, there can be no property. Without the right to destroy or sell, there can be no property. Any form of ownership which can be nullified without the owner's will or death is not property. Conceptions of possession exclude one or many of these rights or rules, sometimes all. Yeah. I have to agree with them. These are claims that a person who says what property is has a ownership claim on it, and they would not give that up until they die, or until they relinquish it by selling it or trading it or giving it to someone other than themselves. I don't disagree with anything he's saying here. That possession is a significantly different thing than property, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So he's trying to debunk the claim that there's a. He said the question is, haven't you heard of the tragedy of the commons? It proves that property rights are necessary. His response is, well, because we used to believe in the established capitalist system, some of us are familiar with the tragedy of the commons mechanism. Then he explains what the scenario is, gives an example of it, and then he says, it is not property rights specifically that prevent the tragedy of the commons, but rather ownership as a general concept. I thought we didn't like ownership. Ownership had all those prerequisites that he just said in the previous point. But apparently, now that we're going to talk about ownership as a general concept, it doesn't have those points. Okay. Most importantly, some form of personal or collective responsibility. Okay. I think we could have joint ownership over something. Shares in some interest. All right. Irresponsible use of property can equally lead to disaster. Yeah. And it is also worth pointing out that property rights include the right to destroy, that property rights are a form of hoarding, and that property rights are not much help against externalities like pollution, especially when those producing the externalities are far more powerful than their victims. Well,
he's just using this is just stating things, right? He's not explaining how it is necessarily hoarding, right? Like he doesn't actually make any. He's just making truth claims with nothing behind them.
Yeah.
This is classic shitty sociological research.
Well, there's a couple of different things that he's going on here. Let's see. Let's try to break them out into a couple separate things. All right, we've got the problem with externalities like pollution. That's one thing. And then he's also talking about property owners have the right to destroy their own property. Okay, yeah, they do. And it is not in my own self-interest to do so. Why would I destroy my own property when I can sell it and benefit from that?
No, or you mix your labor in with it in order to be able to gain something from it. Also, whenever he starts talking about things like the destruction of property, everything pretty much gets in some way destroyed whenever any kind of use is occurring. By the very fact of my laptop being on, it may start to heat up, which then can to start breaking down the CPU at some specific point within 4 to 5 years. But that doesn't mean that I'm therefore hoarding or that it's in some way destructive by its very nature because I'm using it for the short amount of time that it actually is around. But it's just a rearrangement of atoms. So.
Yeah. And the thing that a lot of people don't realize that's critical to this understanding is that the way that wealth is created, the actual stuff that makes everyone else's lives better, is when you take actually it doesn't even have to be a human being that does it. When a object is converted from its present state, or from what its state was, into something that has more utility and more value to the society, wealth is created. This is how wealth is created. So if you have some sort of earthquake that occurs and what used to be a mucked up stream that had no potable water, somehow there's a cliff made through this earthquake and now it's falling from a waterfall and has potable water available there. Wealth was created in that moment. It wasn't created by a human at all, but it was wealth creation. Okay, well, property, the fact that it exists is it's an incentive for someone to take that property and convert it into something that is more beneficial to themselves. In so doing, when they relinquish it through death or through trade, they've transferred this additional wealth that has been created by them to someone else. They have benefited everyone. The fact that they also have more wealth in their property because they've made these changes lets them take the surplus and do things that are really cool with it, like, I don't know, charity and help other people, or trade where they help other people. If you don't have surplus, if you don't have excess, you cannot resolve the needs of others. Like, if I'm going to starve by giving my sandwich to a poor person who's starving, the starvation does not cease. There's still starvation. But by me taking my property and in making it better by using tools and technologies and hoarding, I can actually make things better for myself and therefore everyone else as well.
Yeah, and I'd like to get to this next thing he has here, if you wouldn't mind. Okay,
sure.
it says, what about self-ownership? Do you not believe that individuals own themselves, reject property? Self-ownership, according to him, is a meaningless concept that has been rejected for many people, by many people, without rejecting proprietarianism. That doesn't mean anything that's saying that democracy equals truth. Okay, so ownership is a relation between a person, which is in control, and an object, which is controlled. The idea of self-ownership therefore implies that the person owns his or herself. This is a circular argument. How can an object own itself? How can a singular entity be both in control and controlled in the same relation? We see that the concept of self-ownership is actually nonsensical. Now, I'd actually like to talk about this a little bit here.
Yeah, sure.
If we use the term instead, consciousness ownership, which ownership is kind of a necessary here because there is a scarcity to it, right? So my consciousness cannot be used at any given point in time. And from what we've been able to tell right now, that is kind of the way it is until we can finally dial in our brains, and then everything's going to get really, really weird whenever we can connect them to a mainframe. But the truth there is that the moral claims and statements you made are not justified if they contradict the claim you're making. So he talks about ownership of our beliefs, what we should think, what we should do. He's telling us all these things that we should be using our consciousness in order to achieve. Our consciousness is a tool that is using itself. It's a bit of a confusing concept, but it's because consciousness is also confusing. It doesn't completely omit the fact of the matter that we do use our consciousness in the way that we are. Does any of that make sense?
It does. The thing I would say is my response to it is that what we have here is a conflation or a misdefinition of words. A lot of times people will use the term ownership, and it's not actually ownership. It is final decision-making rights.
Perfect. Yeah.
Just because I have final decision-making rights over myself does not mean that I, quote, own myself. And I own this physical body, yes. The components that are a part of this physical body I can sell legitimately as my will. If I wanted to, shave, I don't have much hair anymore, but if, back in the day when I grew out my hair, if I wanted to shave it and turn it into a wig and sell it to somebody or give it to somebody, I certainly could. And I own myself. What ownership is it's the final decision-making of choice based upon matter and a decider. There exists in the world atoms. These atoms have no locomotion of their own. They don't decide what they're going to do. They don't have decision-making capabilities. That's not one of their properties. But a sentient being, a life form like a human being that actually can make decisions, then can change what happens with that matter and decide where it goes, what it does. And the person who has the final authority on the decision is the owner. And in the case of the United States, well, that is Barack Obama. Okay? Every single atom that exists in the United States is actually owned by Obama, because if he wanted to choose to decide that these atomic structures will be moved over there and done this, that, the other thing with them, whether it be me or whether it be my table or whether it be my computer, he can do so. He currently owns everything in the United States because he has ultimate decider power. That's what ownership is. And it doesn't matter whether it's a physical body or whether it's a tree or a chair.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see here. Goes on to say, if you reject self-ownership, how can you talk about aggression or rights? It's a good question, I think. He says, the concepts of aggression and rights can easily be defined without referring to self-ownership. Oh, really? All right. Aggression can be defined in relation to the conflicts that occur when one person's value expression interferes with another person's value expression. Okay, I don't understand this. Can you clarify? I mean, what does he mean here?
Aggression can be defined in relation to the conflicts that occurs when one person's value expression interferes with another. He's just still using the word self-ownership, but he's just renaming it to value expression.
Yeah, but the thing is that we can have a conflict with our value expressions just fine, and there's no aggression involved. Okay, my value expression is I want to use self-ownership, and he wants to use value expression. Okay, there's no conflict there, except for the fact that I think that he's an idiot, and he thinks I'm an idiot, I guess. Okay, no, this just because there's a conflict in these idea thinkings has nothing to do with whether there's aggression or not. The point is that when there's aggression, it's a dispute as to who is going to have the authority to act upon matter. Just, I want this matter to do that, and you want the matter to do that. Just so happens that I was born with this matter right here, and you happen to want to put a knife through this matter right here. That's where aggression occurs, because I am the ultimate authority for what happens with this matter here. And if you're screwing with it, you're aggressing against me.
I'm just going through the rest of this article, and all of this is just conflating terms one after another. He basically states the word possession again when it's really just meaning private property. He goes into the difference, how free market is different than capitalism. I mean, this is just I don't know. It almost just feels not even worth getting through this whole goddamn thing.
Well, I don't know. We're not that far from the end, and they're pretty short.
All
Um,
right.
let's see. What's the basis for possession? Well, no human being can make use of the products of human act. No human being can live without making use of the products of human action. Wrong. Sorry. It's absolutely false. Okay. You could. It just would be really, really weird and hard to do. But
Can you explain how you could without use of the products of human action?
well, let's see.
Because I mean, even for eating something, you still have to be able to swallow. You're still using
Well,
some kind of human
no, I guess
action
if
in order to understand.
I guess if you were saying the self, you know, okay,
Yeah.
if you're counting the person's own actions of themselves as being products of human action, yes, okay, all right, I'll
Yeah, I mean,
grant.
it's the same as no dog can live without making use of the products of his dogginess. You know, he
Yeah.
still has to be able to eat and sleep and all these other things. So, yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with this.
All right. So people have a right to what they legitimately produced or acquired. What? He's just saying property rights. I thought he didn't like property rights.
I think it's different than possession, and he says this is not the same as accepting a right to usury based on it. What's interesting is the fact that he talked about private property, and when he was discussing it, he said you could end up destroying it. But guess what? I need to consume food in order to be able to eat it, and that is necessarily preventing someone else from being able to use it. And it was the form of the destruction of it as it was at the time. Though, again, there's no real destruction in this sense. It's just a moving of atoms in order to dictate something, a new kind of creation. In this particular case, if I consume something, it then gets broken up by acid into my stomach, becomes specific types of bacteria, and then, you let it go out of your ass. So this is just poppycock. This
Poppycock.
is
We
just.
love the poppycock.
Mhm.
Um, well, to me, he just actually said that property rights exist. I mean,
He did. No, he did. He did. He's just reusing terms.
yeah, the thing that he doesn't like is the idea of somebody doing usury. And as we addressed in the previous show, usury is an agreement that is made between people to provide the benefits of specialization of labor. I'm really good at managing property, so therefore I create apartment complexes that provide homes for people who would not necessarily know how to make their own homes. They
Yeah.
benefit. Okay. I guess I'm going to go on a little aside here because it's not in here, but I've often heard when it's referring to this concept of denying someone something, using coercion and so on. In a way, the example is given is, let's say that there is a person who has fallen down in a well. Okay, so there's this person who's fallen in a well, and you come upon it, and you see that they're down there, and they're going to die of starvation, um, and then you yell down to them, "Tell you what, I'll get you food, and I'll even maybe get you out of there if you'll agree to my terms." And you use all these different, you say you've got to become my sex slave, you got to do this, all these bad things, right? So you're taking advantage of their circumstances to exploit them, to gain benefit usury in this situation. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, I wasn't the one that pushed them down there. Okay, and the unique nature of this lifeboat scenario is a bit, it conflates a lot of issues. But the question is me offering someone a solution to their predicament, but having conditions for receiving that, exploitation and aggression?
What do you state to that? Because I think it is exploitive to a given extent, right? So I like
Sure.
the YAD principle. You're a dick. It's not necessarily unjustified, but societally that is just a really terrible thing to do. And of course, this is a lifeboat type of scenario. And when you have a disastrous cancer known as a state, dabbling around in lifeboat scenarios to me seems almost worthless. But
well, I guess then the question is, how is it not exploitative to take advantage of someone's hunger by saying, well, then you're going to have to give me some money in order to get these apples that I've made?
it's a fair point.
Um, well,
Yeah.
sorry, this is the way it works. If you don't actually, if you don't actually labor to produce that which you need to consume to survive, the hardships of what nature provides us, well, you die. And by me offering you a way out of that is not exploitation. It is an offer to assist you if you find that the scenario is acceptable.
Yeah, so it's more distasteful rather than unjustified.
Yeah. And being that we have so many other people that are around on this planet who are willing to trade with each and every one of us to provide these particular goods that we need to survive, makes the amount of extortion, if you want to call it that, drop in price. The amount of extortion for getting food is extraordinarily low now. We have such a surplus of people willing to make food available to us that they can't. There's no way for a person to really take advantage of other people through usury, as is feared in this type of position.
Yeah.
All right. The stock thing, I'm just going to go ahead and pass that over.
By the way, I still wouldn't completely misstate that exploitation is an unnecessary term in that particular case, in the well scenario. Like, so if I'm choosing to really emotionally manipulate an individual because I know that they were abused in the past, right, and taking advantage of it, I could state that though it's not necessarily unethical, it is exploitative because you're exploiting the lowest forms of them in that particular case. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think that that would be more manipulation, but it's.
No, I mean I could be conflating terms here, but I don't think it's out of the realm or unnecessary to think about or to contemplate.
Yeah, I think that when people are negotiating, some people are coming from a position of strength, some people are coming from a position of weakness. If I'm a person who has labored long and hard and accumulated, hoarded a lot of wealth, then I am in a greater position for exploitation of others, theoretically, right? Which is the big fear from the socialist. But in truth, these opportunities exist for every person if you don't have a government interfering with the free market. The government prohibits people from becoming taxi drivers in New York City unless they pay $100,000 for the right to do so. Any person who can buy a car could theoretically become a taxi driver and make money doing it. Same thing with hairstylists. In Colorado, you have to go through a certain, I think it's like 2 or 3 week course that you have to pay for. Then you also have to pay for the license. And
so in this particular case, it's one of those things where we're stating that though that could be considered manipulation in comparison to what the state does, the state allows for this kind of manipulation much more often due to its coercive power, right?
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely.
I think that's kind of what we're getting at here.
It's critical to realize that what happens when you create a state is that you create a trough that holds power and influence for every aspect of life. And the big pig will come over and eat from that trough, and then it will make every other pig not able to eat from it. They will crowd out by getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more powerful. And they will use that power and influence to make it so that nobody can compete with them. And the decision-making becomes one of, if you don't ostracize others, if you don't prevent others from getting their share from the trough, then someone else will become a big pig and push you out. By creating this tragedy of the commons, which is exactly what the government is itself, is a tragedy of the commons. By creating that tragedy of the commons, you have incentivized everyone to become as big of an exploiter as they possibly can.
Yes.
By having this dispersed rights of ownership, yes, there could be people who would own a section of land, put up apartment complexes or railroads, and have a county store or the railroad store where you had to use their script, and you had, if you were working on their railroads, yes, they could take advantage of you. That could happen. But being that we have so much land available to us all, and usable land, and plenty of other people to interact with who are potentially better partners to cooperate with, you can go elsewhere and do those things. By making it a state, you've isolated it into just one group of people that you have to pay homage to and give them whatever it is that they want in order to get what you need. So
Yes.
the exploitation is far worse. Absolutely.
Yep.
So let's see here. Oh, he talks about the if you reject property ownership. Okay, so he says, no, we do not reject all forms of ownership. We simply reject property ownership. All right, and he says that in response to the question about if I take your toothbrush, your bed, your house, that's not an argument against what the question was. Okay,
Yeah.
if you reject property ownership, how is that not denying that I can just take your bed and sleep in it, or your house and sleep in it? If you reject property ownership, that is property ownership, though. All right. Not an answer. All right, let's see. Doesn't the means of production change over time? The hammer could be the final product, and then it becomes the means of production when building a house. All right. So his response is that the social anarchist view is that at that point in time, whoever is actually using it owns it. Right, so when I jump into your bed and use it, I own it. Too damn bad. Suck it. Oh, I've got cooties.
Yeah. I'm just seeing the holes all over this. If there's no real form of self-ownership, but there's only possession, there's no actual private property, but I don't see how anything could be considered immoral or unjustified after that fact, because I don't really understand how morality could even exist in this particular case, because you're not owning your own actions. Because it's just so fucking overwhelmingly illogical.
Yeah.
That trying to wrap my head around it is like trying to wrap my head around, I don't know, a square circle. It's just contradictions.
So we've got a question or a comment over here. A couple of them. Let's see. Mike Blessing said Francois will be that person telling us who gets what, because he's the rightful God Emperor, don't you know?
Yeah, but he's not. Don't worry though. He's not going to have any babies because he's anti-natalist, so we don't have to be concerned about that.
Yeah, we won't have to have the reign too long. All right, let's see. Kenji says property is whatever is economically feasible to exclude others from using. What do you think of that? Property.
I like where it's going. I'd like it to be explained a bit more.
Okay. Well, he says that it's a general form of the homesteading principle. Okay. Well, I suppose that
because if you have so much property, like land property, that you can't even possibly be using it or be able to defend it or anything else, it's not really your property anymore, is it?
Right. I suppose what he's saying is, it's if there's some property, some land that I don't know, let's say that it's in the middle of the Mojave Desert, it's not economically feasible to exclude others from going out to that location and using it in some fashion. So you wouldn't necessarily claim it as property, but if you got your house and you would like to exclude other people from it, well, you're definitely economically benefiting from it because you can get sleep and you can get recreation. and you can get safety and security and protection from the elements. So you're benefiting all these different economic ways. So it is economically beneficial to exclude others from it. Being willing to take the burden of protecting your property, whether it be hiring somebody to protect it for you or protecting it with your own life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose that's somewhat true, but I think that even in that you have to remember that there's subjective value that's going on in there. So somebody would be subjectively valuing the Mojave Desert area, and they have real, I don't know, naturalistic tendencies. They want to protect the environment in that area so that the horny toad doesn't get killed by people polluting that area. So they create a horny toad protection preserve. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there is some economic incentive there for them to do that because they find value in the protection of the species. So, yeah, I think the statement is true. It's just the problem is a lot of people don't understand that when you say economically feasible, it's not actually economically feasible. They're gaining subjective profit by owning it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, so let's see. That addresses that. All right. Let's see. Why is anarcho-capitalism a contradiction in terms? Let's see. As explained in the first question, the issue is that in the long term, a free market based upon capitalist property allows for enormous power disparities in state-like powers. Okay? Free markets are compatible with anarchism. Capitalism is not. Because I own the tools, I can dictate how you employ your skills and to what end, regardless of the fact that I need your skills in order to utilize those tools that I possess.
So is he talking about essentially collective ownership of everything?
Well, I think basically what he's saying is that if I go through the process of creating a tool,
so if I create a Bobcat tractor, and then I own the piece of land that I'm using on, and then I tell someone I'm going to give you $20 an hour in order for you to mow or take care of this particular area, and that is exploitative.
Well, it is enormous power disparity.
Okay, but what if he doesn't want to use any of those things? He's just doing it for the money. You see this empty hole of just stupidity involved in this? Like, yeah. This is what's funny is that you have to be incredibly intelligent to be this dumb.
You have to work at it. It takes a lot of
really hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just to double check here, if we're living on an island and I spend 3 days going without the food that I could harvest with my hands in order to make a fishing net, okay? This fishing net is mine. Now, I can use the fishing net all by myself, and I don't have to let anybody else have it. Let anybody else use it. All I have to do is just cuddle up with it like it's my own blanket. It's my whoopee. And I'll just hold on to it and hold on to it and hold on to it because I'm possessing it. It's mine, and you'll never get to use it. But I found out that you're not catching as many fish as you'd like with your hands. So I offer to make a trade. Why don't you go ahead and use my net, and you can have 2 fish per day as long as I get 3 fish per day. But you are only catching 1 fish with your hands. You get a better deal. I get a better deal. We both benefit. This is called specialization of labor. And if you want your own net, why don't you go ahead and spend the 3 days necessary to do it and go without any fish? Or maybe you could use my net for about, let's say, 5 days or so, build up a reserve of fish, and then go ahead and make your own net. If you'd like to make your own net, you're free to do so. I can't stop you. There is no intellectual property or state that is prohibiting you from creating the thing that it is that I'm using to produce all this excess wealth.
Well, you know what's great about this article is that I always wonder, trying to figure out how libertarian socialism is all about, and he's outlining it for me so I can see just how ridiculous it is. So thanks, Francois.
I think that left libertarianism, we're going to have to get into that at some point in time on this show. Go into C4SS, I think it is.
Yeah, I would definitely get Kinsella on that episode because he has
Yeah,
some pretty good breakdowns in regards to leftist libertarianism.
yeah. I definitely am going to want to get into that one at some point in time. All right, so let's see. Can't we just work together and smash the state now and worry about those details later? The short answer is no. The AnCap wants to abolish the state. The ANSOC wants to abolish all hierarchy because they wouldn't have a football team in an anarcho-socialist world. They wouldn't have a yoga instructor because that's hierarchical. Doesn't make sense, but all right. Let's see.
I have a bigger dick than him, therefore I'm hierarchical to him. So that's unequal because that means that maybe I'm going to be able to get things that he doesn't want. Right?
Well,
Once you go reductio ad absurdum when it comes to the equality thing, you see how quickly it all falls down. You don't even need to reduce it that much. I mean, just on its own face value, it's ridiculous.
Well, just I mean, I think that he's not necessarily saying that hierarchy is in like there is a disparity of skill sets or a disparity of physical capabilities or prowess. I think what he's talking about is specifically that a hierarchy as in a person has the ability to tell somebody, well, this is the way it's going to be done, and the other person can say, well, I want to do it this way, and they go back and forth, and somebody has the final ruling authority on it. Well, yeah, you know why? This hierarchy thing is a good tool to be used, is because there are some people who are better at making decisions for certain things. I'm not very good at actually deciding how to fix a car. I'm just not. I don't know how to fix a car. But there are some people who really know how to fix a car really well. And if I got a job working someplace on where I'm supposed to fix cars, and I say, but I want to do it this way, and he'd say, no, you're doing it this way. Sorry, it works. It works for both of us. It benefits both of us. I get to actually benefit from his insights, his knowledge, his experience.
And the thing is, it's observable just on the Voluntary Virtues Network. Some people's strength is going to be more Austrian economics. Other people are going to be philosophically more inclined. Like my specialization in the way is kind of child welfare services, that kind of government thing, children's rights, stuff like that. There's specialization in all of these different things. We all kind of got to grasp onto it, and it allows us also to the fact of the matter is we only have a certain amount of time on this earth, and we only have a certain amount of time in the day to figure out what we're going to choose to specialize on. If every single person tries to be every single thing, then we have a bunch of people who are really shitty at almost every single thing.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, if you look into the history of the Communist Manifesto and other writings from that mindset, the idea was that, yes, we would actually have every person being capable and understanding and knowledgeable in all these different positions so that they could swap out positions and not become specialized in one area, so they don't have they're not locked into some meaningless life, drab life of being a cog in some machine. Yeah. See, what happens is I specialize in doing, I don't know, let's say web design, which I did for many years. And I figured out how to do things with CSS and JavaScript that are very difficult. The amount of time that it took me to figure those things out, especially working with Internet Explorer, was a very long time. Now, I could train somebody on how to do that. It might take them a little less time, but the point is that the amount of time that it would take me to catch up to speed on, let's say, how to do brain surgery would be even longer. So
no, this whole thing honestly is coming out of the psychology of someone who feels like he is owed something. Wouldn't you kind of agree with that? Well, you have that and I don't have that, but I'm owed that particular thing, right? And this actually comes from the psychology of Francois Tremblay, from what I've known about him in general. This is a guy who hasn't done a very good lot in life, and uses it to him it's, well, the reason why I'm not doing well right now is because I'm owed specific things and I'm not given them, and there's an exploitative nature to society as a whole right now, so I can blame it on something. else. It occurs over and over and over again. I mean, you see it especially proliferated in things like the zeitgeist community, where they just assume that everything is, that some great god known as this computer simulation is going to be able to give us all the things we don't want. I mean, we want, and none of us are ever going to have to work again.
Well, the master CPU will take care of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but who the fuck's going to run that CPU, or who's going to bother even trying to create these things if there's no form of ownership whatsoever, and if you have no financial incentive to do so? It's just maddening,
because when you have a supercomputer, greed goes away. Didn't you guys know that?
Oh,
hey, Michael,
how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. I did want to comment on this, the master CPU thing, the zeitgeist movement thing. Look, if you want to actually see how a society really does end scarcity for something, really gets rid of it, the capitalist system has done it. How much does a book of matches cost you?
Yeah, really.
Nothing. It's
they
nothing.
They fucking give it to you for free whenever you buy cigarettes.
That's right. You get them for free anywhere you buy cigarettes. You get them for free at restaurants. You get them for free at bars. You get them for free at casinos. Of course, unless the state prohibits smoking. All right. Then what about ketchup and mustard and equal and sugar and even sugar in the raw and cream? How much does it cost to get any of those things if you happen to have a hamburger at a restaurant? Nothing. It's free. It's included. It's part of everything. Now, at some point in time, the technological advancements that make certain things happen, like, I don't know, the provision of high-speed internet access, might become so cost affordable that by having an apartment, it's already included. In fact, oh, wait a minute, it's already been done. You could go to a Starbucks and you get free Wi-Fi. How's that work? Capitalism. Capitalism actually resolves the scarcity problem for things that can be, have the scarcity reduced. And the things that are the most important to people in their particular lives, those are the things that will be resolved quickest.
Yeah, it's important for us, though, to use terms like semi-free market whenever we're talking about the particular society we're living in right now. Because I think there is this proclivity for us to go, oh, well, capitalism gave us this, but whenever we talk about anything bad, we go, oh, well, it's not a capitalistic society. So I think we should be trying to kind of keep that, on point, or else we're going to be coming out as people who are just like, well, as long as we just had 1,000 Walmarts, we'd be all fine, which is the present system as it is right now, which is a regulated system with a little bit of competition, but with just that small amount of competition, we are proliferating the way we are right now. But, it's funny, though, the only thing I was thinking about the entire time was whenever you were talking about, unless the government makes it illegal to smoke inside of a bar or a casino, which to me is the rudest thing the government ever did. It makes all bars feel like TGI Fridays. It's the worst.
Chuck E. Cheese.
It just like, I remember whenever they banned smoking in bars, I'd walk in there and I'm like, this is too clean. This is not nearly as seedy as it should be.
Yeah, I would like to actually enjoy some seediness with my grease-soaked pizza, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
I would like some seediness when I go out to get into other people's shoes and throw balls at pins.
Yeah. No, oh my God, yeah, bowling alleys where they just smell like stale cigarettes and then you're still bowling. And the only thing I'm thinking is, well, if it's going to smell like shit, I might as well be able to kill myself with some nice little delicious cigarettes. So, it's just rude.
Yes, it is.
Completely rude. No, I'm really bringing down the tone of this particular episode.
No, you're not. You're bringing a lot of attitude. The deal is, I'm not a smoker. I smoked for over a decade, and I quit. And I hate cigarettes with a passion. And fuck the government for making it illegal. That's my 2 cents on it. How dare they subsidize it? How dare they raise taxes on it on either end? Giving any kind of government legitimacy to this industry. To me, it's completely disgusting how the government thinks they own us. That's really what it comes down to, right? They think they can tell us what to do.
And guess what the semi-free market allowed for me to be able to do? It took me an entire month to go through when I used to smoke one of these a day, and now I use this instead. So even with that semi-free market, there were things to be able to get me out of that particular habit. And now the government is trying to ban these things, right? And like New York City, they were saying you couldn't even use these in a bar when it's just water vapor. And the argument was, well, it may end up harming you. You know what fucking harms you? Taking 8 shots of whiskey and then driving in a car. Like a comparison, really. water vapor with a little bit of nicotine versus, hell, even the exhaust from a car being close to it is probably worse for you than any of the vapor they're going to get from an e-cigarette.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, we were going on with this this FAQ. Was there any more to really touch on this? Because
well, the
he basically the last one. If the owner provides everything but labor, why should the worker have a right to the products? This is a circular question in that it hinges entirely on one's position on ownership. From the perspective of possession, the owner is the person who's using the object, and thus would be part of the workers, not an individual private owner separate from workers. Therefore, the question reduces itself to, if the workers provide everything, why should the workers have a right to their own products, unquote, which is trivial. From the perspective of property, the workers have no right to their own products to begin with. So the question is clearly false. Shanklin, you want to destroy this for us?
I'm sorry. So I have somebody from my other job trying to bug me on the phone
okay,
right now.
well
Sorry.
I'm sure Robert can take a stab at this.
all right.
Well, catch me up on what you're talking about real quick. Just give me the topic.
If
Go ahead.
If the owner provides everything but the labor, why should the worker have a right to the products? And
Oh yeah.
that was a question. The response is that this is circular reasoning, that if you actually look at possession as being what constitutes ownership, then the worker is providing everything, and they obviously own the products of their labor. Of course, it's completely ignoring the fact that the person who initially work material, the tools, the factory, the whatever, he is the person who has no rights to the fruits of his labor, which is his building, his product, the tools that he created. Somehow he no longer has rights to them because somebody else is in use of them. Well, that's, quite frankly, slavery.
Yeah, Michael, to kind of catch you up on this whole article, self-ownership.
I know where we're at.
Self-ownership doesn't exist, but somehow we still own our actions because there's moral inclinations to them, and
you can own your labor. Just
is no such thing as exactly, but you don't actually own any of the fruits of your labor because there's no longer self-ownership. And then there's no such thing as private property, but there is such thing as a possession, and possession is me holding this laptop right now, but as soon as I'm no longer holding on this laptop, I therefore do not have it. And somehow, someone else then is allowed to be able to own it, even though there's no ownership, which all equals freedom.
Well, I think they would argue that you are able to possess things, but they don't believe in any ownership whatsoever, which of course leads to tragedy of the commons, which also leads to sovereign immunity. One of the things that really bugs me about the workers are exploited argument is, first of all, that's the best option that they have. Right? Government can't just snap their fingers and produce next best options. Well, it can. I guess it can have you dig ditches for $12 an hour instead of making $7.50, right? And then you fill back the ditches, but that's not really helping society at all. So the thing is that all that capital, people don't think about all the time that went into savings. People, when people have capital saved up, savings and capital is nothing other than prolonged or prolonging consumption, right? Putting off consumption now into the future. That has a reward that's carried with it, right? Usually you can get interest off that. That's what the market naturally builds upon, and rightfully so should. But what happens is people put all this time and labor into their capital and build up their capital and make an investment, a risk that all the other workers don't have to take. They go home to work. They usually don't have to think about work outside of the 8 or 10 hours that they go, especially nowadays. They don't really have to think too much about the job. It's not like on their minds 24/7, whereas the guy who's got the investment has all the risk. He's the one who has, when he goes to bed, lays his head on the pillow at night, he has to think about that. So there's all these added things that nobody's talking about, but what really comes back, I don't want to sound too over the edge saying, well, the workers are actually exploiting the bosses. You could argue that, but really what I want to argue is the subjective theory of value, and this shines true more so now than ever, right? How can you value something such as somebody else's, what occupation? Well, the best way we can do that we've ever found is through the market system, immediately giving us updated pricing, mechanisms for, hey, we have this capital allocation that's moved here. Is that good? Is that bad? Do we want to increase investment? Do we want to withdraw investment from this? what's the next thing to do? That's been the best, most efficient way. Central planners obviously don't have perfect information, so they're all over the place. So it really comes back down to the fact that as long as you have people voluntarily agreeing to do things, usually you have to assume it's one of the best options that they do have, as long as there's not a gun to their head, right? They usually chose one of the best options for themselves already. There's not much the government can do. It's like people think that government magic pens can write legislation, and all of a sudden you get all these new houses, right? It's like, no, everything the government roads are built with the same people who would have been building roads. They're just subsidized by the state and told where to build all erratically, and don't have R&I, they don't have research and innovation. So there's a lot of things that are missing from this equation, but there's no such thing as exploiting the worker because of the subjective theory of value. If you could say that the worker is being exploited, you could argue just the same way, backwards, the other direction, and rightfully so, that the employer is being exploited because, once again, the worker doesn't bring anything but his labor usually, whereas everything else of the job is brought by the investors and the managers, et cetera,
yeah,
right?
He's dictating. He's essentially dictating what we are allowed to, what not to do. Francois Tremblay, he's being our tyrant in this particular case. And he's also, Thaddeus Russell from the Renegade History of the United States did a really good kind of breakdown of Marxism and how much it is puritanical and about how, not everyone wants to be a manager of the company. Some people just want to be able to come in, know what they're doing in this particular case, work for 4 hours, maybe make $600 or whatnot, and then just do that. But according to Francois Tremblay, that is innately exploitative. So he's telling us what we can and cannot do, even within interactions between one another, which is essentially statism by its very nature. He's stating that voluntary trades of goods between other human beings is statist in some way, in the private property sense, but his tyrannical tirades regarding what we can and cannot do with our own thoughts and working with one another is in some way unjustified. It's just stupidity.
Well, the other thing that a lot of AnSocs will say is really vital is that the workers have an ability to actually make the decisions for how the company is going to proceed in some way. This is because they are the closest to the product. They know what it is that they need on the front lines, being the worker. And yes, having input on that is definitely important.
But the dishwasher doesn't know how the McDonald's franchise works.
Exactly.
Right? His fucking opinion doesn't matter in that particular case.
No, he knows that those glasses would be we could wash them some easier way maybe though, if we did X, Y, and Z, but that might not fit into the global scheme, right? This all goes back into like trend projection analysis. We did this stuff, and I hate to say that college really makes you like anything, but this is one thing I did take away from that was good. You have bottlenecks, you have constraints in the real world and production, and when you do something one way, it could cost you 7 weeks, but you end up gaining 10 weeks because it saved you time on some other thing, right? So it's give and take. So what the dishwasher sees in the back, which he thinks might increase the production by 3 hours or something, right? Maybe he's right, and maybe he can even submit his opinion, and people will listen to him usually. But maybe there's another part of the equation that he hasn't been filled in on. He's busy washing dishes for 40 hours a week, and not talking about all the equations. It's just maybe there's a part that he's not understanding about the business. I know being I've been at the lower end of the chain. I've been moving up the middle part of the chain for the last few years of my life until I came over into full private with Voluntary Virtues, and with White Cloud I'm kind of moving up into the executive level now, and there is a huge difference. And I would not have been able to do what I'm doing now with the company I'm at now in a C-suite position at all without the last 15 years of like real life experience, right? So I think sometimes people don't understand that part of it is that the people at the lower end, they sometimes lack the experience, and I'm not saying diss on their opinions and that they don't have anything good to ever contribute. I'm just saying, there's obviously, and the reason that most people aren't, pitchforking other CEOs and stuff is because, you know what, I might feel that the guy and me at the lower level at my company are right, but when you actually step out into the real world, every lower end worker feels that way anywhere you go.
Yeah, and not only that,
and there's a reason for
it. He's also discussing things like collective ownership and everything else, but guess what? Say you own a particular business And there is this new type of technology which makes it so that you don't need that the guy working the dishes anymore. Instead, you get the superpowered dishwasher. Doesn't matter anymore. Well, since he also owns the company, then you can't rightly fire him, and then you cannot buy that particular dishwasher because he's going to be able to prevent you from being able to do that.
Absolutely. You're going to respect the innovations that are going to occur that might displace people at certain job sites. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of the show. I do want to thank Michael Shanklin for popping in at the end, and of course Carlos Morales from Truth Over Comfort podcast for joining me in our discussion about Francis Tremblay's frequently asked questions. Not really impressed there, Francis. So, if you'd like to go ahead and amend those things, or if you'd like to come onto the show and actually, debate these things, we'd be happy to have you on.
Oh, and just message him. I'm sure he'll come on.
Yeah, well, we'll be happy to have you and each up.
Thanks, Rob.
In any case, take care. Thanks for joining us here at the Anarchist Experience. Good night.
Talk to you soon, guys.